My name is Panos. I'm a co-founder at NetBeez, and today I'll be talking about how to troubleshoot work from home issues with our tool. Okay, I'm going to start with a presentation, then I'm going to do a quick demo just to highlight and visualize a few things. So, of course, the problem we're trying to solve here is to help organizations in this new reality of remote, hybrid, work from anywhere work, how to help their end users troubleshoot in a better way, right? So everybody was sent home, everybody was faced with the same reality, right? How to help these employees when they have issues. That issues, of course, came from a number of different sources: Wi-Fi, ISPs, their own laptops, right? And in a few months, we launched our Windows and macOS agents, which it's a lightweight background process that runs on the user's machine. It consumes, like I haven't seen, more than 1 or 2% of the CPU, depending, of course, on your laptop's configuration, and no more than 50 megabytes of RAM, right? So very lightweight, and the installation is pretty standard, either locally through an installer or can be installed remotely from the help desk through a management system like Intune or Jamf, etc. So the agent that runs on the user's laptop, and for the ones familiar with our tool, is pretty much identical with what our network agents do, right? So it runs continuous tests, synthetic testing, that helps you simulate user experience by running end-to-end tests like ICMP for latency, DNS, HTTP, etc., towards hosts that your users are going to use. It can be Salesforce, Google, Teams, and we have another set of tests which we call scheduled tests, and they measure more performance with hyperv, network speed, or VoIP, right? So you can run these end-to-end tests again and measure if your bandwidth, for example, on your VPN tunnel with hyperv, I'm going to show you during the demo, if it is where it's supposed to be. So the results are being sent back to our dashboard central server and through a secured connection. And the point I want to make here is that we don't collect any, I would say, like personal information. We don't capture any traffic, so we don't interfere with the end user's privacy, right? So we create our own synthetic monitoring traffic with the tests I just mentioned just a second ago. So here I list I would say, the 6 root cause potential, like culprits of bad user experience. Okay, we're gonna go through each one of them one by one, and then show you how we capture information, how we address these issues, and how we help IT troubleshoot issues that come from bad user experience for their employees, right? So let's start with the PC performance. So this is obvious, right? So if somebody's CPU is throttling, if their machine is running a number of applications that their CPU cannot keep up with, you're gonna have bad experience, right? That can either translate as jittery voice or video conferencing calls, or it can be long loading time for web pages and applications, web apps. So we capture that information by capturing CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk utilization, and you see here an example on the left-hand side where the CPU is consistently below 60%, and the right-hand side you see there a stretch where for about 5 minutes the CPU was consistently at 100%, right? So that can, and I have an old laptop myself here to do my testing, and I often see that when I'm trying to load pages and I'm on Zoom and video conferencing calls, I get this jittery experience, which obviously today is very important to be able to identify what the root cause is, right? And be able to address issues either by upgrading your hardware or advising your workers to be more careful what way they do on their machines. In terms of Wi-Fi, the next weak link, I would say, in this long chain of root cause of bad user experience, we capture a number of metrics that have to do with the Wi-Fi connectivity of the user, like signal strength, link quality, MCS or MAC. And with those, you can identify if a user is you know, on a strong, let's call it Wi-Fi connection or not. By surveys we've done, we see that around 30% of root cause problems are coming from Wi-Fi. And for example, we see that if the link quality on Windows is lower than 80% or the MCS below 5, that means that your Wi-Fi is subpar, right? One thing that we advise, and we see like customers advise their employees also kind of demand it, is to get rid of the Wi-Fi. And that's actually the best approach. Plug into your router when possible, and that is gonna get rid of this problem completely, right? Nonetheless, that's not always possible, and that's where we come in to help with this kind of information. Gateway performance. So now again, people were sent home and now they're using their consumer grade gateways, right? Both as Wi-Fi and LAN gateways. I often have to reboot my router, right? When I see that things are not working well, I see disconnections on my Wi-Fi that are kind of don't make sense. Things are fixed by doing a good old reboot. So with this latest release now, we give you the ability to run a simple ping test the gateway. It's we all know the shortcomings and what ICMP traffic does, but it's a very good metric to have to understand if you see that your ping to gateway has high packet loss, right? Or your latency, if you're plugged in, is more than 5 milliseconds, or on Wi-Fi more than 10 milliseconds, let's say, right? That shouldn't be the case, right? So that can be a good indication that the gateway is not performing how it's supposed to be, and actually needs to be taken, right? And we don't expect users to be, I would say, skilled enough to know and mess with their gateways, go change channels, etc., to fix things. So that can help with fixing these problems. Moving on, ISP performance now. With this regard, we use NetBeez as a way to run speed tests from all your users. Everybody can run a speed test by themselves, and that's simply enough. You can ask a user if there's something going on, run a speed test for me, right? Go to speedtest.net or fast.com and tell me what you get. However, that's not scalable. We give you the ability to run speed tests on a scheduled way, as we call them. So usually customers run a couple of speed tests overnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., when we expect that there is, pure users in the network, either Wi-Fi or wired. We expect to get kind of a baseline of what the ISP can give at that time, right? And then a few times during business hours. And you see here, for example, a case where we put a condition where if the speed test is lower than 15 megabps up or down, then highlight those users. And on this graph, where we have the upload and download speeds, whoever is on the lower left corner over there, obviously, is having either a service with a very low bandwidth, or there's something else going on, right? That helps you see, okay, if I need to, for example, I have somebody on my call center, right, working from home, and they need to have at least a 15-20 megabps connection to at least, run their video conferencing during the business hours. I better get that speed on my measurements with NetBeez.
How do you deal with users who are hybrid, for example, where it's one thing maybe to run iPerf 4 to 6 times a day at home, if they're maybe the only person there, or they have a very tolerant family watching Netflix. but when that same person then goes into the office, still running the same endpoint agent, and there are other people also running the agent that's being deployed out there, how do you avoid having 20 people in an office trying to run iPerf 4 to 6 times a day, albeit for the slice of the day that they're in the office, right?
That's a good point. Actually, we have had this as a feature request, and from a few customers where they ask us to, for exactly the same reason you described, that, hey, can you identify when a user specific SSID, which the SSID can be, for example, the office SSID, right? To stop running these tests, which don't make sense, that don't need these measurements, right? Yes, it's something that we have in mind and others have asked. So good point. So moving on, now in terms of like internet outages, last year we introduced path analysis. So this is a way to discover equal cost multipath when our traffic leaves our, I mean, any network, but in this case that, you know, in question is the ISP network, right? Because it's a black box for us. Its employee might be even not at their home, right? They might be moving, vacationing and working. And with path analysis, we help you identify and see the path flow from the user's machine all the way to whatever end host you're, in its case, monitoring. In this case, you see, for example, a case here where on the top hand here, we see like, you see a case where we identified a high latency in our ping tests from the user's laptop to Google. And at the same time, this data is overlapped with our path analysis visualization tool. We looked at the path analysis results, right? And in that case, what we noticed is that at the same time, when his traffic is leaving his home, we see that all the routes after that are in red. So in our case, red means that the round trip time on each hop is more than 150 milliseconds, and orange means that it's more than 100 milliseconds. And from that, it's very clear that the ISP was causing this bad user experience, right? High latency, 2 or 3 seconds loading time of web pages. And after a few minutes, I think a couple of minutes, that problem went away and things went back to normal, right? So this is the ability to identify and visualize issues that have to do with the ISP that its user is using.
I have a question around testing the ISP links. I've got customers who will not enable split tunneling, so you would never get that path analysis. Mm-hmm. Do you provide some sort of correlation in your system so that you know, you can compare this user to this other group of users to kind of say, well, maybe this is an ISP problem or something like that because these other users are fine, or is that you know, up to the operators to check multiple other users for that correlation?
Yeah, it's not something we do right now automatically, like the correlation, but definitely, you know, this part of our long-term vision where we can correlate data from even like not only data from one single, let's say, account or dashboard, but from multiple users, right? Multiple accounts, and be able to correlate the data and provide this information that you just mentioned.
Okay.
Okay. And the last point here, the last kind of weak link is, you know, applications themselves. So, for example, if at the end of the day the server is overloaded of an on-premise application, right, or SaaS application, and the load time is really attributed to the application itself or the backend database, then there's nothing you can do, right? Even if your Wi-Fi is performing, even if your connection is where it's supposed to be, things won't work out, right? So the way we approach this is by not only measuring the user experience from their laptop, but also from I would say, as close to the application as possible. The way to do that is, let's talk about an on-premise application that you are hosting in your own infrastructure, is to install NetBeez agent in the same infrastructure with the application itself, right? So it can be a virtual agent, an OVA, it can be a Docker agent that runs the same one hop away, let's say, right, on the application. Then from there, you can run the same tests, the same application tests, HTTP tests, latency tests that the user is running. And from there, we can have a baseline of what the application, how application is doing, right? And isolating that as a application performance data point. So if we use that virtual NetBeez agent in combination with our end user NetBeez agents, we can very clearly see, hey, if my application measuring NetBeez, right, that's running the same VPN with the same let's say, infrastructure with my application, is showing that there is an application performance issue, then all my users are gonna be also affected, right? And that, of course, is gonna be reflected by all the users also seeing the same issue, and then we correlate that, right? So we can say if 80% of your users are seeing that a common problem like slow load time of an application or application failing even to load, then we can create an incident, as we call them, access through either a dashboard or through APIs. And from there, we can clearly show that the problem, for example, is on the application side and everybody's affected or not. And with that, okay, and then last slide before I show you the demo. So by having all this information and all these data points I just described, our goal is to give to, I would say, layer one help desk support personnel the ability to use this data and at least be the first line of defense, right, before escalating data to L2 or L3, which is much more costly and much more time consuming. So many customers have done it successfully. We have many success stories where they have installed this to the NetBeez Windows agent or the Mac agent on thousands of users and managed to to integrate that with their support processes and reduce ticket escalation up to 80 or 90% to L2 or 3, right? So before, without having any visibility on the user's environment and device and laptop, they went from, to be able to troubleshoot issues and identify issues before calling up network engineers, right, or application engineers. But here's like a simple flow chart that everybody can follow, right? So, for example, if a user complains or they see like a ticket coming in, right, they can very easily jump on the NetBeez dashboard and they can see, okay, so do I have any, let's say, application incidents open, right, by monitoring my specific application also with NetBeez agent. And if yes, that means that the problem is with the application, I can very quickly escalate to the application group. If I'm seeing that I have any incidents open related to, let's say, the user's CPU, right, or Wi-Fi metrics or ISP, and they're isolated for a specific user, then I have to work with that specific user and either advise them what to do or collect more data and identify the issue and help them fix it. All right, so this is, I don't want to go into too many details, but this obviously is installation we have for demo purposes. We have a number of agents here on Mac and Windows, and I'm going to look at this window machine that is sitting next to me here. And on my general tab, I see here my high-level information. This machine right now is on Wi-Fi and wired connection for a weird reason, right? But I did that. I have both plugged in, but my Wi-Fi, my default route is going through the wired interface. My VPN is disconnected right now, so I can have this information. And the interesting thing here, for example, what was mentioned earlier, I can set up certain tests to be related, be kind of dependent on VPN. So if I'm on VPN, I'm running this ping test, right, to a VPN host, I can say that when I'm not on VPN, don't run this test anymore because that data doesn't make sense, right? If I connect my VPN now, this data is going to come in running, right? You see here the other test I'm running, ping DNS HTTP for Zoom, my gateway test here, right? And if I look, so here it is, right? So it's around, I would say on average, the last 15 minutes, 2 milliseconds. That's my wired gateway and 0 packet loss, right? So my wireless information, signal strength, link quality, bit rate, channel with historical information. Obviously, for all this, you can go back in time and troubleshoot issues. Path analysis. For example, I can look at, I was looking earlier at this. Right, so this is what it looks like. Okay, so I can see like hop-by-hop information, where it's going through ASN number, latency for each hop, right, based on how many data points are going to that specific hop. And the last one I wanted to mention here for this quick demo is schedule test. So for example, here I'm running an iPerf test over my VPN, right? And I can see that over the course of the last week, my VPN has been doing okay. I'm going, you know, there are some variations, but I'm around 20 millisecond, 20 megabps, right? Going through. Speed test also looks, you know, pretty solid. I have a 200 megabps here, up and down, fiber. So of course I get some, you know, ups and downs, but in general, I'm getting the performance I'm supposed to get, right? So this is the information we collect and how we empower help desk to really be on top of things and identify issues without having to call the user and be on a share screen with them.
So let's say I saw earlier that you were talking about ISP tagging and grouping. So let's say my end users are split between Comcast and AT&T, and AT&T is having some sort of problem, and you guys have picked up on that. Can you notify the users who are grouped in those so that they don't even try to put a ticket in, that we say, hey, we know that there's a problem out there, don't bother putting in a ticket, and you'll, you know, notify them when it clears up, or give them some way of heading off that help desk contact?
Got it, yeah. Right, so that's another, I would say, level of defense 0, right? Even before opening a ticket, right? So out of the box, I would say no, but using our API that Panos is going to talk in a second right now, customers have done successfully. So they have been able to collect the information, because every customer has different needs, a different scale, right? They have been able to use this information and detect issues like proactively by using all this information we talked about, like even the speed test, ISP, performance, like gateway latency, and provide the information proactively both to the help desk so they know about these things, but also to employees. And they can, yeah, as you just mentioned, right? They know that help desk is on top of it, or it's not their responsibility, and they don't have to even open a ticket, right?
Okay, so kind of just following that through, just thinking on the end user side, you're not prompting the end user at any point for, or, hey, we observed this, or hey, you know, the reason it's slow is because you're also torrenting in the backgrounds. It's, you can do it through the API if your group is enabled enough to do things like that programmatically, but you're not enabling anything like that in the platform by default.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
When you talk about the real-time HTTP tests, how are those being done? Is that like a browser plugin? How are you getting that? Are you watching what the user is doing from a browser, or are you just running those tests through your agent independent of what the user is doing?
Yeah, they're independent. We don't capture the user's information, what they browse or whatever on their machine, right? So it's our own testing, an HTTP GET that helps you run this test synthetically at the frequency you want, right? Every few minutes or every few seconds, if you want to be very aggressive.
So when you, so those, they're basically just an HTTP get to the page. We're making sure that the page loads, but you're not actually like fully rendering a page or anything. It's just, can I establish a connection and get a response code? If we get a response, we're good.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.